Abraham Lincoln, the great emancipator, the man who preserved the Union and officially abolished slavery. Sit back, relax as we enjoy and explore the legacy of the most talented man to ever serve as United States President. Before we get into it, please subscribe to the channel if you have not already, as it's the best way to support this work that we do. And if you already have, thank you for your continued support. Now let's jump into it. The U.S. presidential election of 1860 was a turning point that exposed the nation's deepest conflicts and set the stage for the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln, representing the anti-slavery Republican Party, won the presidency without carrying a single Southern state, highlighting the regional divide over slavery and states' rights. In many Deep South states, Lincoln wasn't even on the ballot. In the one state where he did appear, he got just 1.1% of the popular vote. The Democratic Party was split into the Northern Democratic Party and the Southern Democratic Party. They nominated Stephen A. Douglas and John C. Breckinridge, respectively, and their partisan split underscored the nation's inability to work together regarding the slavery issue. Lincoln's victory, achieved with less than 40% of the popular vote, but a decisive electoral majority, was perceived by many Southerners as a direct threat to their way of life, and they viewed slavery as a constitutional right. This perception led to the secession of 7 Southern states before Lincoln's inauguration in March of 1861. The secession served as a warning sign of the Union's collapse. The election also marked the emergence of the Republican Party as a dominant force committed to ending slavery. Until 1913, only one Democrat was elected president. Many of Lincoln's predecessors made compromise after compromise as their attempt to keep the nation united. Ultimately, the 1860 election made clear the nation's failure to resolve its most contentious issue through political means, leading to the Civil War. The suspension of habeas corpus during the Civil War was one of the most significant constitutional crises in United States history, and that was Lincoln's big blemish on his legacy. Habeas corpus, a legal principle protecting individuals from arbitrary prison, is enshrined in the Constitution but allows for suspension, when in cases of rebellion or invasion the public safety may require it. Abraham Lincoln, confronted with a rebellion in the form of Southern secession, authorized the suspension unilaterally in 1861, especially in Maryland and other border states where Confederate sympathies threatened Union control. His decision bypassed Congress, prompting intense legal and political controversy, particularly after the arrest of John Merriman, a Confederate sympathizer whose case Chief Justice Roger Taney ruled unconstitutional in ex parte Merriman. Lincoln ignored the ruling, asserting the necessity of preserving the Union above strict following legal norms. His rationale echoed the idea that the Constitution was the most powerful document in the nation, but it must remain flexible enough to ensure the nation's survival. Critics viewed the decision as an executive overreach, while supporters argued it was a fair response to an existential threat. The episode highlighted the ambiguous boundary between the executive power and individual rights during wartime. Lincoln later sought and received congressional approval, cementing the precedent and expanded authority. Ultimately, the suspension of habeas corpus under Lincoln revealed the enduring dilemma of how a democracy preserves itself without sacrificing the values of the founding documents. Abraham Lincoln preserved the Union during the Civil War through a blend of constitutional bravery and strategic ideas that reshaped the American presidency. Faced with the unprecedented secession of Southern states, Lincoln perceived the conflict as a test of the viability of the democratic self-government. He maintained that the Union was rooted in the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, and thus no state had the right to secede. Lincoln's use of executive power, including the suspension of habeas corpus, the blockade of Southern ports, and the expansion of military without congressional approval, demonstrated his willingness to stretch constitutional norms in an attempt to preserve the Union. At the same time, he navigated complex political structures, keeping border states loyal to the Union and balancing military power. His signing of the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 reoriented the war as simply fighting against slavery. Moreover, Lincoln deterred European powers from officially recognizing the Confederacy as a country. Lincoln's communication, especially through speeches like the Gettysburg Adress, paved a new path forward for his constituents. He also ensured the 1864 presidential election proceeded despite the war, reaffirming democratic legitimacy under the gravest of circumstances. Lincoln was successfully reelected in 1864, but Confederate states did not vote. By the time of his assassination, Lincoln had asserted the political groundwork for reunification and constitutional transformation. His leadership preserved not only the territorial integrity of the United States, but also the democratic ideals at its core. Lincoln's signing of the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 was a pivotal moment in American history that officially abolished slavery in all territories and land owned by the United States. While limited in immediate scope, freeing enslaved people in Confederate territories angered Southerners, but it realigned the Union with morals from the Declaration of Independence. As mentioned, the proclamation discouraged European powers, particularly Britain and France, from recognizing or aiding the Confederacy, as they were reluctant to support a slaveholding state. Foreign powers were strikingly uninvolved in the United States Civil War. Domestically, the war continued to rage on, and after Lincoln's great work to win the war for the Union, he was assassinated. Though criticized by some as a wartime necessity rather than a principal law, the proclamation laid the legal groundwork for the eventual abolition of slavery through the 13th Amendment. Lincoln's careful timing demonstrated his sense of political strategy, ensuring the proclamation would not appear to be an act of desperation. Its signing redefined Lincoln's presidency, elevating him from a cautious constitutionalist to a visionary, courageous leader. In both symbolic and practical terms, the Emancipation Proclamation reshaped the greatest president in our history. On April 14, 1865, Lincoln celebrated victory in the war by attending a production of Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater in Washington. Lincoln said, "They don't think anything of it," while laughing hysterically. He was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth. Booth then slashed Major Rathbone with a knife before jumping to the stage, breaking his leg in the process. Booth was on the run for 2 weeks before being trapped in a burning barn, then later shot by Boston Corbett. The conspiracies and complexities of Lincoln's assassination are beyond the scope of this video. In short, Lincoln's death the next morning left the nation shocked and heartbroken. Lincoln is revered as the greatest president in American history, but was preceded by the worst. Click here to learn more about James Buchanan, who influenced the worst Supreme Court decision in American history. Thank you for watching. Have a good weekend.